the panic meter. I badmouthed the Nuggets. I badmouthed the Bucks last week. I look at the standings now. Milwaukee is 1-6. The Sixers are 1-5. And the only other team at the time of recording that they're in the same neighborhood with, really, as one-win teams are the Utah Jazz, who just got their first win. Extenuating circumstances have impacted both of these teams. When you talk about the Bucks just struggling, Giannis missed their last game. The Sixers, Joel Embiid hasn't played yet. Now he's going to be suspended for 3 games when he gets back in the lineup for an altercation with a reporter in the locker room. Paul George just came back, had the alternate version of his Gatorade commercial where he didn't hit the game winner and probably should have passed it. I say all that to say, Kyle, where do you stand with these teams? Is it time to hit the panic button? Is it too soon?
I mean, last time that we were on here, I think this was even going into the season, I was already panicking about the Philadelphia 76ers. The Milwaukee Bucks, I wasn't expecting them to get off to as poorly of a start as they have, but we're going to start with the Sixers. Obviously, that's a terrible situation, between Embiid and the reporter on both ends. It's unfortunate that things had to escalate to that point, but it's even more unfortunate that Embiid was even put in that situation in the first place by the things that were written about him and his family. So, 3-game suspension. I have a feeling that's probably going to speed up his return to play, so that way they can, get those suspension games on the calendar, and then he'll be able to play hopefully sooner rather than later. But, for anybody that's tuned into a Sixers game, it has been the Tyrese Maxey show. That guy is just absolutely chucking every single time he touches the ball. And Gil and I have both been avid Tyrese Maxey fans on this pod for a while now, but 30 points per game on 25 shot attempts, he's trying to do a lot to make up for the absences of Paul George and Joel Embiid. And, it's not a very deep team. And we're seeing that with Embiid out there struggling, Paul George just getting back into the lineup. And that's going to be an issue, like I talked about going into the season. That's going to be an issue all year. You double down on an injury-prone superstar by bringing in an injury-prone all-star. And the hope is that they're all going to be healthy when it matters most. And what are the odds of that actually being the case? Probably not very high. So the panic meter is definitely overflowing for the 76ers. Now on the Milwaukee Bucks side, I'm actually almost more panicked about the Bucks than I am the Sixers, just because Giannis missed the last game, but just because their guys have been available. You know what I mean? This is a team that Dame and Giannis just haven't really found a way to click. And defensively, that's where they used to hang their hat on during the Mike Budenholzer days. They were ranked 19th in defensive rating last year. They are 22nd at the time of recording. Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo are averaging 58.6 points per game. The rest of the team is averaging 53.1 points per game. So they're not getting a lot of help. And even though Dame is playing pretty well on the offensive end, opposing guards are having a field day against the Bucks so far this year. I wrote it down just because I was curious about it. Tyrese Maxey had 25. Kobe White had 35. Cam Thomas, 32. Jaylen Brown, 30. Ja Morant had 26 points and 14 assists. Donovan Mitchell had 30 points in a game winner. And then Darius Garland had 39. So that backcourt of Damian Lillard and Gary Trent Jr. is not guarding anybody. Brook Lopez and Giannis aren't making up for it the way that they once were. And that is a team that is supposed to be at the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, and they have been anything but so far. So to answer your question, am I panicking about either team? Am I panicking about both of them? I am panicking about both the 76ers and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yikes. I can't help but panic the way you outlined it. I will say, and I mentioned it last week, the Chris Middleton injury thing looms large, but really when you talk about it, how much of these issues is he really going to fix, right? And I got to give a shout out to our guy, Kane Pittman, who was on the Bucks beat for a while. I talked to him. He was in Boston during the finals last year and really just revisiting the Jrue Holiday trade and going out to get Damian Lillard and the regrets that may or may not be associated with that. And it kind of feels like in retrospect, Milwaukee was cornered, right? Because I think, they had their championship run in 2021, an impressive championship run, especially considering what Giannis did after his knee bent the wrong way. But after that, those playoff exits, we saw how flawed they were and offensively how things sputtered in the playoffs. And it wasn't going to work with Jrue Holiday. They had to make that swing for Damian Lillard. And I don't think they anticipated the Trailblazers figuring something out with the Celtics for the Celtics to become the juggernaut that they are. That's the risk you run. That's the bed that the Bucks have made, and they've laid in it now. What I'm concerned about them, and I'm more concerned about them just because we talk about, Paul George being a 34-year-old injury prone type guy, Joel Embiid's injury woes, whatever. I trust Nick Nurse. Don't necessarily know if I can say the same thing about Doc Rivers at this point. And I think that we are just a few games away from a big remark. Dame officially just being done with it. Giannis just being done with it. And the worst part about it is you revisit the trade to get Drew Holiday. That pick that they have is either going to New Orleans or Brooklyn. They don't have a first round pick this year. So if they finish in the top 4 of the draft, that pick's going to New Orleans. They finish 5 through 30, it's going to Brooklyn. I just think that Milwaukee and Philly both needed everything that go their way, but I think the likelihood of everything going Philly's way was higher than it was for Milwaukee. And the fact that it's not going their way, it's even quicker for things to unravel, and I don't know what's going to happen next.
I think like one of the craziest things about we are only 7 games into the season for the Milwaukee Bucks. I have already seen Giannis Antetokounmpo photoshopped in a Warriors jersey, in a Heat jersey, in a Brooklyn Nets jersey, in a New York Knicks jersey. Like that is all, and yes, perennially online. Like it is what it is. Yeah. Like I'm seeing all this stuff coming across my Twitter timeline, whether it's real or fake or whatever it is. But it's just like to see him already, there's reports coming out of, he'd rather go to Brooklyn than Miami. He'd rather go to Miami than Brooklyn. Like, we are 7 games into the season, and yes, they are tied for dead last place with the Utah Jazz. That is not where they want to be. But like, come on, man, it's already falling apart. And like, I'm sitting here going, we're probably going to have to get prepared for potentially a Damian Lillard trade request, maybe a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade request, like around this year's trade deadline. And I mean, how many teams have been able to just kind of blow it up and restructure things mid-season and make it work? The answer is not many, if any. I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a team that has been able to just kind of blow things up, pull it back together, and make it work. That Cavaliers team that LeBron carried to the NBA Finals in 2018, they completely dismantled their roster. They went all the way to the NBA Finals, and then they got swept. So that's the only one off the top of my head that I can really think of that like they really just kind of blew up the roster. But I don't think that really had anything to do with the guys on the roster. That had everything to do with LeBron James being maybe the best version of him that we've ever seen. But I digress. Yeah, it is not good in Milwaukee right now. I don't foresee it getting much better with Chris Middleton returning. Obviously, he's an incredible scorer, but how much does he really still have left on the defensive side of the ball? I'm not sure. In an Eastern Conference that is clearly running through Boston at this point, I just don't know if Milwaukee or Philly are the 2 teams that are the biggest threat to take down Boston, and that is the teams that they are trying to be.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I will say about that LeBron team, they probably didn't start the season 1-6 either. So again, just sounding the alarm as far as what's going on in Milwaukee, it does make sense to have that concern. I guess the last point I'll make about that is that I can see the way things are right now and the way these teams are playing. I see a clearer path to Philadelphia correcting things. They're 1, 6, 7, 8 game win streak away from it. I have a tough time seeing how Milwaukee's stringing together wins like that. And you get to a point where they're going to just scratch and claw to maybe get back around 500. And then what? And when you said blowing it up mid-season, I thought about the KD and Kyrie trades that the Nets somehow figured out how to orchestrate, toward the end of the season last year. So I don't know. And that happened like around the deadline. So I don't even know if it gets this far for the Bucks. I guess it just depends on how they bounce back from this slow start. But Giannis is still on Twitter making dad jokes, so it must not be as bad as it is yet. But when that changes, then I think we maybe should be concerned and really hit the panic button after the panic meter has gone high.